7 years. That is how long Cassandra Bennett spent trying to forget a man she could never replace. 7 years of silence. 7 years of distance. 7 years of telling herself she made the right choice. Tonight, all of that was about to break apart. The Grand Hall of the Northern Alliance shimmered under thousands of crystal lights. Alphas from every territory filled the room, dressed in their finest, their laughter and conversation blending into a low hum of power and pride. Cassandra stood near the edge of the crowd, holding a glass she had no intention of drinking from. She was only here because her friend Vanessa Foster had begged her to come. Vanessa had insisted that the trip would be good for her, a chance to step away from the healing center for a few days, to remember that the world outside Ash Hollow still existed. Cassandra had agreed mostly to stop Vanessa from asking again, never imagining the night would unfold the way it was about to. She did not belong in a room like this. Not anymore. Not that she ever truly had. Then she heard it. A voice she had spent 7 years trying to erase from her memory. Cassandra! Her hand tightened around the glass. Her heart slammed once, hard, against her ribs. She turned. At the top of the marble staircase stood Alpha King Derek Chandler. He was taller than she remembered, broader, colder in the eyes, yet somehow the same man who once looked at her like she was the only person worth seeing in a crowded room. Around her, whispers rippled through the crowd. The Alpha King never married. They say he was waiting for someone. Derek began walking down the stairs, slowly, deliberately. Every conversation around him died into silence. Every eye in the hall turned to follow him. He stopped directly in front of Cassandra. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Derek's voice came out low, calm, but underneath that calm was something sharp, something that had been waiting 7 long years to be said. "You walked away once." Cassandra's breath caught in her throat. "But this time," Derek said, his silver eyes never leaving hers, "I am not letting you go." To understand what those words meant, we have to go back. Back to where it all started. Back to a school full of golden children, and one girl who never belonged until the most feared alpha in the kingdom decided she did. 7 years earlier, Royal Mooncrest Academy sat on a hill overlooking the capital, its towers built from white stone that seemed to glow even on cloudy days. It was the kind of place where the children of Alpha Kings and Lunar Queens learned how to rule. Cassandra Bennett did not belong there. She came from Ash Hollow, a small border pack that most nobles couldn't even find on a map. Her mother ran a tiny herbal shop that barely made enough to keep the lights on. Cassandra had only gotten into the academy because of a scholarship meant for promising young wolves from struggling packs, a label that followed her like a shadow every single day. She walked through the halls with her head down, her uniform slightly too big, her shoes slightly too worn. The other students didn't bully her with their fists. They didn't need to. A look was enough. A whisper was enough. A laugh behind a raised hand was enough. Cassandra had learned early that survival at Mooncrest meant making herself as small and as quiet as possible. She sat at the back of every classroom, ate her meals quickly, and never lingered anywhere longer than necessary. It wasn't loneliness. Exactly, it was strategy. The less attention she drew, the fewer chances anyone had to remind her how little she belonged. To survive, Cassandra found a quiet way to earn extra money. She wrote essays for lazy nobles who couldn't be bothered, letters for boys too nervous to speak to the girls they liked, apology notes for students who had said something cruel and needed to smooth things over before their parents found out. She was good with words, and in a school full of wolves who cared more about bloodlines than books, that skill was worth something. It was supposed to be simple, quiet work, quiet money. Nobody needed to know. Then everything fell apart. It started with a letter Cassandra wrote for a girl named Erica, who had a crush on a boy in the upper year. Cassandra wrote it the way Erica asked, soft, hopeful, a little shy. But somehow, the letter ended up in the wrong hands. By the time it reached the boy it was meant for, someone had already read it out loud in the courtyard, twisting the words, claiming Cassandra herself had written it as a confession. To Derek Chandler, the future Alpha King. She thinks she has a chance with him, someone laughed. As if he'd ever look at someone like her, another voice added. Cassandra stood frozen in the courtyard as dozens of eyes turned toward her. Her face burned. Her chest felt tight, like the air had been pulled out of the world. She wanted to explain. She wanted to say it wasn't even about Derek, that she barely knew him, that the letter belonged to someone else entirely. But explaining would mean admitting she wrote letters for money, and that would only give them something new to mock her for. So she said nothing. That evening, Cassandra walked back to her dorm alone, replaying the moment over and over in her head. She thought about every possible way she could have responded. She thought about explaining the truth that the letter belonged to Erica, that she had only written the words because Erica had begged her to, that she'd never once thought about Derek Chandler in that way. But even as she thought it, she knew it wouldn't matter. The story had already taken on a life of its own. People believed what was easiest to believe, and Poor Girl Chases the Alpha King was a much more entertaining story than the truth. She sat on her narrow bed, pulling her knees up to her chest, and allowed herself exactly 3 minutes to feel sorry for herself. That was the rule she had made for herself years ago, after watching her mother cry quietly over unpaid bills late at night. 3 minutes. Then it was time to keep moving. When the 3 minutes were up, Cassandra wiped her eyes, opened her textbook, and got back to work. There was an essay due for a Noble student named Heather Wheeler, and the payment from that essay would cover groceries for the next 2 weeks. Feelings didn't pay for groceries. The next morning, Cassandra arrived early to class, hoping the rumor might have faded overnight. It hadn't. If anything, it had grown. That was when Tiffany Jenkins decided Cassandra was the perfect target. Tiffany was beautiful in the practiced way that came from years of training to be someone's future Luna. She had been promised to Derek by their family since childhood, though Derek had never once shown interest in the arrangement. Tiffany didn't care. To her, the engagement was already real, and anyone who threatened it, even by accident, even by rumor, was an enemy. "Look at her," Tiffany said loudly enough for half the courtyard to hear. "A border pack nobody, dreaming about the Alpha King. It's almost sad." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Cassandra felt her face grow hot, but she kept her eyes forward. Don't react. Don't give them anything. This is what they want. Maybe she thinks if she writes him a love letter, he'll feel sorry for her family. Tiffany continued, clearly enjoying the attention. "Is that it, Cassandra? Did you think a few pretty words would make him forget who you are?" A few students laughed nervously. Others simply watched, waiting to see what Cassandra would do. Cassandra stopped walking. For one brief moment, she considered turning around. Considered explaining everything, the truth about the letter, about Erica, about all of it. But she had learned long ago that explanations rarely changed anything for people who had already decided what to believe. So instead, she simply looked at Tiffany, her expression calm. "I hope your day gets better, Tiffany," Cassandra said quietly. "It seems like you need it more than I do." Then she turned and kept walking, leaving Tiffany momentarily speechless behind her. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She simply walked, spine straight, eyes forward, until she reached the edge of the courtyard, where the noise couldn't follow her anymore. She didn't know that someone had been watching. Derek Chandler stood near the academy's east entrance, a textbook under one arm, his expression unreadable. He had heard the whole thing. He had seen the girl everyone was laughing at, the one with the worn-out shoes and the straight back, and he had seen the exact moment she decided not to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. He had also heard her quiet response to Tiffany, and something about the calm dignity in it had caught his attention in a way he didn't fully understand. Most people, when humiliated like that, either crumbled or fought back loudly. She did neither. She simply refused to let it touch her, and somehow that made the moment feel like she had won, even though everyone around her thought she had lost. Derek found that interesting. He didn't say anything. He didn't approach her. He simply watched as she disappeared around the corner of the building, and for reasons he couldn't quite explain to himself, he found that he didn't stop thinking about her for the rest of the day. During his afternoon training session, while sparring with another student, Derek's mind kept drifting to the straight line of her shoulders, to the steadiness in her voice, to the way she had looked at Tiffany without a trace of fear. "You're distracted today," his training partner, a young alpha named Marcus, commented after Derek nearly missed an obvious opening. That's not like you. I'm fine, Derek said, resetting his stance. But he wasn't entirely fine. He was distracted, and he didn't like not understanding why. For the first time in his life, Derek Chandler, the boy everyone said would grow into the most powerful and feared Alpha King in generations, had noticed someone the world had decided was worth nothing. And once Derek noticed something, he rarely looked away. In the days that followed, Cassandra noticed something strange. The mocking didn't stop completely, but it became quieter, smaller. A few of the students who used to laugh the loudest suddenly seemed less interested in continuing the joke. She didn't know why, and she didn't ask. She had learned a long time ago that asking questions in a place like this usually led to more pain, not less. What she didn't know was that Derek Chandler had quietly made it clear without raising his voice, without making a single threat, that he found the situation with Cassandra Bennett uninteresting. For wolves who spent their entire lives trying to read the future Alpha King's moods, that single word was enough. If Derek thought something was beneath his attention, continuing it suddenly felt like a very bad idea. Cassandra had no idea any of this was happening. All she knew was that the hallway felt slightly less hostile, and she was grateful for it without understanding why. The first time she actually spoke to Derek was an accident. It happened in the academy library, late on a Tuesday evening when most students had already gone back to their dorms. Cassandra was hunched over a table covered in books, trying to finish an assignment before the librarian kicked her out for the night. She'd been there for hours, and her eyes were starting to blur the words on the page. "You're going to ruin your eyesight reading like that." Cassandra jumped, nearly knocking over her inkwell. She looked up to find Derek standing on the other side of the table, looking down at her with an expression that was somehow both bored and curious at the same time. Cassandra's voice came out smaller than she wanted. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I didn't realize anyone else was still here." Clearly. Derek pulled out the chair across from her and sat down without being invited. "What are you working on?" Cassandra blinked at him. Of all the things she expected from Derek Chandler, a casual conversation in the library was not one of them. "History essay," she said carefully. "On the Treaty of Stonewall." "That treaty was a disaster," Derek said immediately. "The terms were unfair from the start. Whoever wrote it should have been removed from their position." Cassandra felt something unexpected bubble up in her chest, the urge to argue. "It wasn't unfair," she said before she could stop herself. "It was the only way to stop the war without destroying both packs completely. Sometimes peace means nobody gets everything they want." Derek raised an eyebrow. "You think that's a good outcome? Nobody getting what they want?" "I think it's better than everyone losing everything," Cassandra said. For a moment, Derek said nothing. Then, to her surprise, the corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close to one. "That's actually a fair point," he admitted. "Most people just repeat what their tutors tell them. You're the first person who's disagreed with me about this in years." "I'm sure plenty of people disagree with you," Cassandra said. "They probably just don't tell you." "No," Derek agreed, his voice quieter now. "They don't." He stood up to leave, then paused at the edge of the table. "You should eat something before you fall asleep on that book. There's still food in the dining hall if you hurry." Cassandra glanced down at the half-finished essay in front of her, then at the darkening window. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, but she also hadn't planned on spending money on dinner that night. The coins in her pocket were already set aside for her mother's shop, tucked carefully into an envelope she would send home at the end of the week. "I'm fine," she said. "I'll eat in the morning." Derek studied her for a moment, something unreadable crossing his face. Then, without another word, he walked off toward the dining hall. 10 minutes later, he returned and set a covered plate down on the table beside her books. Cassandra stared at it, then at him. "Derek, I didn't ask." "I know you didn't ask," Derek said, sitting back down across from her. "I'm not doing this because I think you can't take care of yourself. I'm doing it because I was getting food anyway, and it's stupid to study on an empty stomach." Cassandra looked at the plate, then back at Derek, searching his face for any sign of pity. She found none, just the same calm, slightly bored expression he always wore. "Thank you," she said quietly, and meant it. "Don't mention it," Derek said, already pulling out his own book. Now finish that essay so you can argue with me about something else. Cassandra found herself smiling as she picked up her pen again. For the first time in a long time, the library didn't feel quite so lonely. That night marked the beginning of something neither of them planned. It started small. Derek would show up at the library at the same time Cassandra did, claiming he was just studying. They would argue about history, about politics, about things neither of them had ever discussed with anyone else. Cassandra found that Derek, away from the crowds and the expectations, wasn't cold at all. He was sharp, sarcastic, sometimes surprisingly funny in a dry sort of way. He listened to her opinions like they actually mattered. And Derek found that Cassandra didn't flatter him, didn't agree with everything he said just because of who he was. She challenged him. She made him think. Being around her felt less like being the Alpha King and more like simply being Derek. Of course, not everyone was happy about this new friendship. Trevor Foster, a kind-hearted boy from one of the lesser noble families, had liked Cassandra for months. He'd never said anything too nervous to risk rejection, but he'd always made a point to walk with her between classes to save her a seat at lunch when no one else would. One afternoon, Trevor worked up the courage to ask Cassandra if she wanted to walk to the training grounds together to watch the sparring matches. "I'd like that," Cassandra said, smiling. They hadn't taken more than a few steps when Derek appeared beside them, seemingly out of nowhere. "Cassandra," he said, his tone perfectly even, "I need your opinion on something. It's about the essay you mentioned yesterday." Trevor's smile faltered slightly. "We were just heading to watch the sparring matches." "It won't take long," Derek said, not looking at Trevor at all. Cassandra glanced between the two of them, sensing a tension she didn't fully understand. "I'll catch up with you after, Trevor," she said gently. Trevor nodded, though his shoulders dropped slightly as he walked away. Once he was gone, Cassandra turned to Derek. "What did you need my opinion on?" Derek paused. The truth was, he didn't need her opinion on anything. He'd seen Trevor walking beside her, seen the easy way Trevor smiled at her, and something hot and unfamiliar had twisted in his chest. He hadn't planned to interrupt. His feet had simply moved before his mind caught up. "I forgot," Derek said finally. Cassandra laughed, surprised. "You forgot?" "It wasn't important," Derek muttered, looking away. Cassandra studied him for a moment, an odd warmth spreading through her chest, despite herself. "Derek Chandler, did you just make something up so I wouldn't go watch sparring matches with Trevor?" "Don't be ridiculous," Derek said quickly. Too quickly. Cassandra didn't push further, but she couldn't quite hide her smile for the rest of the day. That night, lying awake in his room, Derek found himself replaying the moment over and over. He thought about the warmth in Cassandra's laugh, the way her eyes lit up when she teased him, the easy comfort he felt when she was near. He realized, with a feeling close to alarm, that he had been looking for her all day, every single day actually. Without thinking about it, without planning it, some part of him had started keeping track of where she was, what she was doing, whether she was happy. The realization unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Derek Chandler was being trained to rule a kingdom. He was being trained to be powerful, controlled, untouchable. He was not supposed to find himself thinking about a girl from a border pack every waking moment. And yet, he did. The next morning, Derek arrived at breakfast earlier than usual, telling himself it had nothing to do with the fact that Cassandra usually ate at this hour. He found a seat near the window, opened a book he had no intention of reading, and waited. When Cassandra walked in a few minutes later, carrying a tray with a small portion of bread and fruit, Derek felt something in his chest loosen slightly, a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. She spotted him and hesitated for only a moment before walking over. "Saving a seat for someone?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Apparently," Derek said, not looking up from his book. Cassandra sat down across from him, and for a while, neither of them said anything. The dining hall buzzed with the usual morning noise students complaining about assignments, laughing about gossip, rushing to finish meals before their first class. "You're doing it again," Cassandra said eventually. "Doing what?" "Pretending you're reading when you're actually just sitting there." Derek looked up, and for a moment their eyes met. Something passed between them, something neither of them had a name for yet, but something that felt important, all the same. "Maybe I just like the company," Derek said simply. Cassandra's cheeks warmed, and she looked down at her tray to hide her smile. Maybe I do too, she admitted quietly. Neither of them said anything else about it, but from that morning on, they began eating breakfast together every day without ever officially deciding to. Cassandra's only friend at the academy, a girl named Vanessa Foster, noticed the change almost immediately. Vanessa was one of the few students who had never cared much about bloodlines or status, mostly because her own family had always treated her as the slightly embarrassing relative of a more important branch of the Foster line. She and Cassandra had bonded over shared lunches and shared invisibility in a school that mostly ignored both of them. "You're glowing," Vanessa said one afternoon, watching Cassandra carefully as they walked to class together. "Don't try to deny it. I've known you for 2 years, and I've never seen you smile like that over a history essay." "It's not about an essay," Cassandra admitted, feeling her face grow warm. Vanessa's eyes widened. "Wait, is this about Derek Chandler? The Derek Chandler who supposedly has the personality of a closed door?" "He's not like that," Cassandra said, a little too quickly, then groaned at herself when Vanessa's grin widened even further. "Oh, you've got it bad," Vanessa said, laughing. "The future Alpha King, and the girl from Ash Hollow. If anyone had told me that story a year ago, I would have laughed them out of the room." "It's not like that," Cassandra said, though her smile betrayed her. We talk, that's all." "Sure," Vanessa said, clearly unconvinced, looping her arm through Cassandra's. "Just be careful, okay? People like Tiffany don't take well to things they can't control. And you, Cassandra Bennett, are definitely not something Tiffany Jenkins can control." Cassandra didn't have an answer for that. She simply squeezed Vanessa's arm gratefully, grateful to have at least one person in this place who saw her as more than a scholarship student or a target for rumors, and grateful, too, that Vanessa hadn't asked her to explain feelings Cassandra herself was only just beginning to understand. If Derek thought his growing feelings for Cassandra would stay quiet and manageable, he was wrong. And the person who made sure of that was Tiffany Jenkins. Tiffany had noticed the change immediately. She noticed how Derek's eyes drifted toward the library doors before class. She noticed how he no longer dismissed Cassandra with the same indifference he showed everyone else. And she decided, with the cold determination of someone who had spent her whole life being told she would one day be Luna, that this would not be allowed to continue. It started with small comments, whispers in the hallways about Cassandra's mother and her struggling shop, jokes about how Cassandra must be working her way up by getting close to Derek. At first, Cassandra tried to ignore it, the same way she always had. But Tiffany wasn't satisfied with small comments for long. One morning, Cassandra arrived at the academy to find the courtyard buzzing with a new rumor, one far worse than anything before. According to the story spreading through the halls, Cassandra had been caught stealing from other students' rooms, using the money to bribe her way closer to Derek. The story even claimed that Derek had caught her in the act and was simply too polite to expose her publicly. It was a lie, every word of it. But by midday, half the academy believed it. Cassandra felt the walls closing in around her. Students who had never spoken to her now glared openly. A few of her professors gave her suspicious looks. Even some of the scholarship students, who usually understood what it felt like to be an outsider, began keeping their distance, afraid of being associated with the scandal. Between classes, Cassandra overheard 2 girls whispering near the lockers. "I heard she's been taking things for weeks," one of them said. "My cousin said she saw her near the dormitory hallway late at night." "It makes sense though, doesn't it?" the other replied. "Girls like that will do anything to climb higher." "I almost feel bad for her, honestly, almost." Cassandra kept walking, her chest tight, her mind racing. "I have never taken anything from anyone. I have spent my whole life making sure I never owed anyone anything I couldn't pay back." But she knew that explaining herself to 2 strangers in a hallway would change nothing. The story had already become more real to people than the truth ever could be. By the end of the day, Cassandra sat alone in an empty classroom, staring at her hands, trying to figure out how everything had spiraled so far out of control over something she had never even done. The door opened. Derek stepped inside, and for the first time since she'd known him, Cassandra saw real anger in his eyes, not directed at her, but burning on her behalf. "It's not true," Cassandra said immediately, her voice tight. "Derek, I swear none of it is true. I would never—" "I know," Derek said simply. Cassandra blinked. "You know? I've known you for months," Derek said. "I know exactly what kind of person you are. You wouldn't steal from anyone, especially not for something as pointless as getting closer to me." He paused. "I already know who started this rumor." Cassandra's stomach dropped. "Derek, please don't." "Don't what? Don't do anything?" Derek's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "Cassandra, you have spent the last few months letting people walk all over you because you were taught that fighting back would only make things worse. I understand why. But I am not going to stand here and let someone destroy your name with lies." The next morning, Derek called for an assembly. It wasn't something he had to ask permission for. As the future Alpha King, his word carried weight that few would question. The entire academy gathered in the main hall, confused murmurs filling the air as Derek stood at the front of the room. "There's a rumor going around," Derek began, his voice carrying easily across the silent hall, "that Cassandra Bennett stole from other students, and that I personally witnessed it." He let the words hang in the air for a moment. "That never happened. Not on any day, in any place. The story is completely false, and I'd like everyone to think very carefully about how it started." His gaze moved deliberately across the room until it landed on Tiffany, who had gone very pale. "I know exactly where rumors like this come from," Derek continued. "And I want it understood, by everyone in this room, that spreading lies about someone because you feel threatened by them is not something I will tolerate. Not against anyone. Especially not against Cassandra." The hall was silent. Tiffany's face had gone from pale to red, but she said nothing, knowing that arguing with Derek in front of the entire academy would only make things worse for her. After the assembly ended, students slowly filed out, throwing curious glances toward Cassandra, who stood frozen near the back of the hall, overwhelmed. Trevor lingered near the doorway, watching Cassandra with a complicated expression. He had liked her for months, but standing there, watching the future Alpha King defend her in front of the entire academy, he understood something he hadn't let himself admit before. He walked over before he left. "For what it's worth," Trevor said quietly, "I never believed any of it. Not for a second." "Thank you, Trevor," Cassandra said, offering him a small, grateful smile. Trevor nodded, glanced briefly at Derek standing a short distance away, and then walked off without another word. He didn't say anything else about it, not that day or any day after, but from that point on, Trevor quietly stepped back, content to remain Cassandra's friend, sensing that whatever was growing between her and Derek was something he wasn't meant to interrupt. Derek walked over to her, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. "You didn't have to do that," Cassandra said quietly. "Now everyone is going to talk about this for weeks." "Let them talk," Derek said. He stepped closer, his voice dropping lower, meant only for her. "No one touches what's under my protection." Cassandra's heart skipped. The words settled over her like warmth spreading through cold hands. "Derek," she whispered, "what does that mean? What am I to you?" Derek's silver eyes softened in a way Cassandra had never seen before. "I think you already know the answer to that," he said. "I just haven't said it out loud yet." "Then say it," Cassandra said softly, surprising even herself with the boldness of the request. Derek looked at her for a long moment, the noise of the emptying hall fading into the background. "You're the only person at this academy who's ever made me feel like just Derek, instead of the future Alpha King. You make me want things I didn't think I was allowed to want." He paused. "I think that means more to me than I know how to say properly yet, but I'm working on it." Cassandra felt something inside her shift, something that had been guarded and careful for her entire life, slowly beginning to open. "That's a pretty good start," she said, smiling despite the tears still drying on her cheeks. For the first time, she let herself hope. A few weeks later, Cassandra received a letter from her mother asking her to come home for the weekend. It wasn't unusual, her mother often asked her to visit when the shop needed extra hands, but something about the tone of the letter felt different, heavier. The journey to Ash Hollow took most of a day, traveling by cart along the dirt roads that wound away from the capital and into the quieter border territories. Cassandra spent most of the ride staring out at the passing hills, her mind drifting back to the conversation with Derek the night before, the warmth of his hand around hers, the promise of a future neither of them had fully spoken aloud yet, but both could feel taking shape. She wondered, briefly, what her mother would think of Derek. Her mother had never met him, had only heard about him through Cassandra's letters' careful, vague descriptions that never quite captured how much he had come to mean to her. Cassandra smiled to herself, imagining the conversation she might have this weekend, finally telling her mother the truth about the boy who had started showing up at the library every evening. She had no idea that conversation would never happen, not the way she imagined it. When Cassandra arrived at Ash Hollow, she found her mother sitting at the small kitchen table, a cup of untouched tea in front of her, staring at nothing. "Mom," Cassandra said softly, setting down her bag. "What's wrong?" Her mother looked up, and for a moment, Cassandra saw something she rarely saw in her mother's eyes: fear. "Sit down, sweetheart," her mother said. "There's something I should have told you a long time ago." Cassandra sat, her stomach tightening. "Before you were born," her mother began, her voice steady but quiet, "I lived in a different pack, a bigger one, closer to the capital. I was young, and I fell in love with someone from a powerful family, an alpha family." Cassandra's breath caught. "What happened?" "His family didn't approve of me," her mother continued. "They said I wasn't suitable, not strong enough, not from the right bloodline. When I became pregnant with you, they made it very clear that if I stayed, I would lose everything, my place in the pack, any support, any future. So I left. I came here to Ash Hollow, where no one knew who I was or where I came from." Cassandra felt the room tilt slightly. "Mom, what family? Whose family was it?" Her mother hesitated, and in that hesitation, Cassandra felt the answer before it was even spoken. "The Chandler family," her mother said quietly. "Derek's family." Cassandra sat in stunned silence, the pieces falling into place all at once. The way certain older members of Derek's extended family looked at her sometimes, with expressions she'd never understood. The careful way some royal staff avoided her name, it hadn't been about her scholarship at all. "Mom," Cassandra said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, "are you saying Derek's father?" "I'm saying his father's brother," her mother corrected gently. "Your uncle, in a way, though he's never known you exist, and he never will if I have anything to say about it. He was the one I loved. He was the one who chose his family's approval over me, in the end." Cassandra pressed her hands flat against the table, trying to steady herself. "And Derek doesn't know any of this?" "Derek doesn't know any of this," her mother said quickly, reaching across the table to take Cassandra's hand. "And I'm not telling you this to scare you away from him, sweetheart. I'm telling you because you deserve to know the truth before things go any further. If this becomes public, if his family realizes who you really are, it could bring back a lot of pain. For both of us." "What kind of pain?" Cassandra asked quietly. Her mother's eyes glistened, though she didn't cry. The kind that doesn't go away just because years have passed. The kind that festers, waiting for a reason to come back out. She squeezed Cassandra's hand. "I'm not telling you to give him up. I just need you to understand what you might be walking into. I need you to be ready, in case it ever comes to that." Cassandra didn't sleep much that night. She lay awake in her childhood bed, staring at the same cracked ceiling she had stared at as a child, turning her mother's words over and over in her mind. She thought about Derek's promise, "I choose you, Cassandra," and wondered, for the first time, if choosing her might mean something far more complicated than either of them realized. When Cassandra returned to the academy on Sunday evening, she found Derek waiting for her near the entrance, exactly as he'd promised he would be. "You look exhausted," Derek said gently, studying her face. "Is everything all right?" Cassandra wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to explain what her mother had told her, to ask him if he knew anything about it, to figure out together what it might mean. But looking at him, at the warmth in his eyes, the easy way he reached for her hand, she found she couldn't bring herself to say it. Not yet. Not when things between them finally felt so right. "I'm fine," Cassandra said softly. "Just tired from the trip." Derek studied her for a moment longer, then nodded, accepting her answer. He pulled her gently into a quiet alcove near the entrance, away from passing students. "I've been thinking," Derek said, his voice unusually careful. About us, about the future. Cassandra's heart began to race. What kind of thoughts? I know what's expected of me, Derek said. I know my family has certain ideas about who I'm supposed to end up with. Tiffany, or someone like her, someone from an old, powerful bloodline. He took both of Cassandra's hands in his. But I don't want that. I don't want a future that doesn't include you in it. Cassandra's eyes filled with tears she hadn't expected. Derek, let me finish, Derek said gently, though there was a slight nervousness in his voice that Cassandra had never heard before. I've spent my whole life being told what my future is supposed to look like, who I'm supposed to marry, how I'm supposed to rule, what kind of Luna is acceptable and what kind isn't. He paused, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. And for the first time, I don't care about any of that. I care about what I want, and what I want is you. I'm going to change things, Derek continued, his voice growing steadier with every word. When I become Alpha King, I'm going to change the old traditions. The ones that say a Luna has to come from a certain bloodline, a certain family, a certain amount of power. None of that should matter. What should matter is who someone is, who they choose to be. He paused, his silver eyes searching hers. I choose you, Cassandra. I want to build a future with you. Will you let me? For a moment, Cassandra thought about everything her mother had told her. The pain, the fear, the Chandler family's history with women like her mother. She thought about the warning hidden inside her mother's story, be ready, in case it ever comes to that. But looking at Derek now, at the sincerity in his eyes, the promise in his words, the way he was offering her a future he had never offered to anyone else, she found that her answer was already there, waiting. Yes, Cassandra whispered. Yes, Derek. I choose you, too. Derek's smile, when it came, was unlike anything Cassandra had ever seen on his face before, open, unguarded, full of a happiness he rarely allowed himself to feel. He pulled her into a hug, and for a long moment, neither of them said anything at all, simply holding on to each other in the quiet alcove while the rest of the academy moved on without them. You won't regret this, Derek murmured into her hair. I promise you, Cassandra, whatever comes, we'll face it together. Cassandra closed her eyes, letting herself believe him completely, even as a small, quiet part of her remembered her mother's warning and wondered how long together could really last, against forces neither of them fully understood yet. In that moment, the future Alpha King had finally found the one thing he wanted more than power. He just didn't yet know how much it would cost. News of Derek and Cassandra's relationship spread quickly. Within days, it seemed like the entire academy, and soon, much of the kingdom knew that the future Alpha King had chosen a girl from a border pack over the noble families who had spent years preparing their daughters for exactly this moment. The reactions were immediate and harsh. Marcus, Derek's longtime training partner, was one of the few who reacted with genuine warmth rather than calculation. He found Derek in the training yard the next morning, grinning as he leaned against the fence. So it's true then, Marcus said. The whole academy is talking about nothing else. Let them talk, Derek said, echoing the words he would later say again in a much larger hall 7 years from now. For what it's worth, Marcus said, his grin softening into something more sincere. I've never seen you like this before. Whatever it is, it looks good on you. Derek didn't answer, but the small smile that crossed his face said, enough. Not everyone shared Marcus's reaction. By midday, whispers had already begun twisting through every corridor of the academy, and the noble families who had spent years arranging futures for their daughters were no longer content to simply whisper. Tiffany, humiliated and furious, withdrew from the academy entirely, her family citing personal reasons that everyone understood to mean something else. But Tiffany wasn't the only problem. A young alpha named Damian Bryant, the son of a powerful family with old ties to the Chandler bloodline, had taken a particular interest in Cassandra, though not in the way Derek had. Damian believed, with the unshakable confidence of someone who had never been told no, that Cassandra belonged with someone from her own world, someone who understood what it meant to come from nothing who wouldn't embarrass her by trying to fit into a life she could never truly belong to. He began appearing wherever Cassandra went, offering unwanted advice, subtle warnings disguised as concern. "You know this won't last," Damien told her one afternoon, catching up to her outside the library. "People like us don't get happy endings with people like him. The kingdom won't allow it. His family won't allow it." "That's not your decision to make," Cassandra replied coolly, walking faster. "I'm not trying to upset you," Damien said, falling into step beside her despite her clear lack of interest. "I grew up watching families like mine get pushed aside the moment we stopped being useful to families like his. You think you're different? You think because he says he loves you, none of that history matters?" "I think," Cassandra said, finally stopping and turning to face him, "that you don't know anything about Derek, or about me, or about what we have. And I'd appreciate it if you stopped pretending you do." Damien held up his hands in mock surrender, though his eyes remained sharp. "Have it your way. Just remember I tried to warn you. When things fall apart, I'm just trying to help you see reality before you get hurt," Damien called after her as she walked away. Cassandra tried to ignore him, but his words lingered, especially as the pressure around her and Derek continued to grow. She told herself Damien was simply bitter, simply jealous of something he could never have. But some small part of her couldn't quite shake the feeling that he believed every word he said, and that frightened her more than she wanted to admit. The noble families, alarmed by the idea of a border pack girl potentially becoming their future Luna, began applying pressure wherever they could. Some approached Derek directly, reminding him of his duties, his bloodline, the expectations placed on him since birth. Others were less direct, instead targeting the people around Cassandra. It started with her mother's shop. Orders that used to come regularly from nearby packs suddenly stopped. Suppliers who had worked with her mother for years began finding excuses to raise prices or cancel agreements entirely. None of it was ever officially connected to Cassandra and Derek's relationship, but the timing made the message clear enough. Cassandra's mother, already weakened by years of hard work and old stress, began to fall ill. At first it was small things, exhaustion, headaches, trouble sleeping. But within weeks, she was barely able to leave her bed. The stress of watching everything she'd built begin to crumble, taking a visible toll on her health. Cassandra rushed home the moment she heard, finding her mother pale and weak, the small shop dark and empty for the first time in years. The shelves that used to be lined with neatly labeled jars of herbs now sat half empty, gathering dust. The door, which had never once been locked during business hours in Cassandra's entire childhood, now stayed shut all day. "Mom, this is too much," Cassandra said, sitting beside her mother's bed, taking her thin hand in both of hers. "You need rest, real rest, not worrying about the shop." "I'll be fine, sweetheart," her mother said, though her voice was barely above a whisper. "Don't worry about me." "How can I not worry?" Cassandra asked, her voice cracking. "Look at you. Look at this place. None of this was happening before." She stopped herself before finishing the sentence, but her mother heard it anyway. "Before you fell in love with him," her mother finished gently. "I know, sweetheart. I've heard the talk. People don't think a quiet shop owner in a border pack pays attention to what happens in the capital, but word travels, even out here." "I'm sorry," Cassandra whispered. "I never wanted any of this to touch you." "Don't apologize for falling in love," her mother said, squeezing her hand weakly. "That's not something you should ever be sorry for." But Cassandra did worry. She worried constantly. And the worse her mother's health became, the harder it was to ignore the connection between her mother's suffering and her relationship with Derek. When Cassandra returned to the academy, Derek immediately noticed the change in her. The light that had grown brighter in her eyes over the past months had dimmed, replaced by something heavier. "Talk to me," Derek said gently, sitting beside her in their usual spot in the library. "Something's wrong. I can feel it." Cassandra hesitated, then told him everything: her mother's illness, the shop's struggles, though she left out the deeper truth about her mother's history with his family. She wasn't ready to share that yet. Maybe she never would be. Derek's jaw tightened as he listened. "This is because of us," he said quietly. "Isn't it? The noble families are punishing your mother to pressure you into leaving." "I don't know," Cassandra said. though they both knew it was true. "I'll fix this," Derek said immediately, standing up. "I'll speak to my father. I'll make sure no one touches your mother's shop again." "Derek." Cassandra grabbed his hand, stopping him. "If you go to your father about this, it will only make things worse. It will confirm that the rumors are true, that there's something between us worth fighting over. It will paint a bigger target on my mother." Derek sat back down, frustration evident on his face. "Then what do you want me to do? I can't just do nothing while your mother suffers because of choices I made." "I don't know," Cassandra admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "I just need time to think." Derek reached over and gently brushed a tear from her cheek that she hadn't realized had fallen. "Take whatever time you need," he said softly. "But please don't carry this alone. Whatever you decide, whatever you need, I'm here, okay?" Cassandra nodded, though she couldn't quite bring herself to look at him. If only it were that simple, she thought. If only being here was enough to fix everything. That night, lying awake in her dorm room, Cassandra stared at the ceiling, Damien's words echoing in her mind. People like us don't get happy endings with people like him. She thought about her mother, lying in that small, dark bedroom, growing weaker with each passing week. She thought about the shop, the one her mother had built from nothing, slowly falling apart because of choices Cassandra had made. For the first time since she and Derek had begun their relationship, Cassandra found herself asking a question she had been too afraid to ask before. Was loving Derek worth the pain it was causing everyone around her? She didn't have an answer, but she knew, deep down, that the question itself meant something had already begun to change. Outside her window, the moon hung low over the academy grounds, the same moon that had watched over Ash Hollow her entire life. Cassandra stared at it for a long time, searching for an answer that refused to come. 2 more weeks passed, and Cassandra's mother's health continued to decline. Letters from home grew shorter, the handwriting weaker each time. The last one had been only a few lines, written in a hand so unsteady that Cassandra had to read it 3 times to make sense of it. "Don't worry about me, sweetheart. Focus on your studies. I'm proud of the woman you've become." Cassandra folded the letter carefully and placed it in the small wooden box where she kept everything important to her old photographs, a pressed flower from her mother's garden, the first letter Derek had ever written her. She sat with the box in her lap for a long time, running her thumb over the edges, feeling the weight of everything inside it. Meanwhile, Derek had begun preparing for something Cassandra hadn't expected so soon, an official announcement. As the future Alpha King, Derek's choice of mate would soon need to be formally recognized, and he had decided he wanted to do it publicly, in front of the entire alliance, leaving no room for his family or anyone else to challenge his decision afterward. "I want everyone to know," Derek told her one afternoon, his eyes bright, with an excitement Cassandra hadn't seen from him before. He had pulled her aside after their last class, practically pulling her down the hallway toward a quiet courtyard, words spilling out of him faster than usual. "I spoke with my father this morning." He wasn't happy, but he agreed to let the council hear my decision. "I want there to be no question about my choice. About us. Once it's done, no one can challenge it. Not him, not the council, not anyone." Cassandra forced a smile, even as something cold settled in her chest. "That's wonderful, Derek," she said, hoping her voice didn't betray the dread building inside her. If Derek noticed anything off in her tone, he didn't show it. He was too caught up in the future he could finally see clearly in front of him, a future with her in it, permanently, undeniably. "My grandmother's old chambers in the East Wing," Derek continued, still holding her hands. "They've been empty for years, but they have the best view of the lake. I thought, maybe, once everything is official..." He stopped himself, suddenly looking almost shy, an expression so unlike him that it made Cassandra's heart ache even more. "I'm getting ahead of myself." "No," Cassandra said softly, squeezing his hands. "I like hearing about it." She meant it. And that was the problem. She could see it all so clearly, the chambers with the view of the lake, mornings together, a life built slowly and carefully out of nothing but choice. It was everything she had quietly wanted without ever letting herself say it out loud. That night, She received a letter from a healer in Ash Hollow, someone her mother trusted. The letter was gentle but direct. Her mother's condition was worsening, and the stress of the ongoing situation with the noble families was actively making things worse. The healer's recommendation was simple, though devastating to read. Whatever is causing this stress needs to stop, soon. Cassandra sat with the letter for a long time, reading it over and over until the words blurred together. The candle on her desk burned low, and she barely noticed. She thought about her mother, alone in Ash Hollow, growing weaker every day because of choices Cassandra had made. She thought about Derek's announcement, about how making their relationship official would only intensify the pressure from the noble families, would give them even more reason to target her mother. An official mating announcement wasn't just a celebration, it was a declaration that could not be undone. It would remove any doubt, any hope that this was simply a passing thing the noble families could wait out. It would make her mother's pain permanent. She thought about everything her mother had given up, her home, her family, her place in the world just to protect Cassandra before she was even born. Her mother had spent her whole life paying for a choice she made decades ago, a choice that had nothing to do with Cassandra at all. And now, because of Cassandra's own choices, that price was being demanded all over again. I can't let this be the reason she finally breaks, Cassandra thought, staring at the letter until the words stopped making sense. Not after everything she already gave up for me. And Cassandra realized, with a heaviness that settled into her bones, what she had to do. The next evening she asked Derek to meet her in their usual spot in the library one last time. Derek arrived with his usual warmth, pulling her into a brief hug before sitting down across from her. "I spoke with the Alliance Council today," he said excitedly. "The announcement is set for next month. Everything is finally coming together." Cassandra forced herself to look at him, memorizing every detail of his face, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about their future, the small smile he only ever showed her, the way his hand automatically reached for hers across the table without him even thinking about it. This is the last time, she thought, and the realization nearly broke her resolve before she'd even spoken a word. "Derek," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Something in her tone made his smile fade. "What is it?" Cassandra took a breath, forcing the words out before she could lose her nerve. I think we should end this," she said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Us. I think we were never really meant to be together." Derek went very still. For a moment, he simply stared at her, as if waiting for her to laugh, to say it was some kind of joke. When she didn't, his expression shifted into something Cassandra had never seen on him before, confusion, quickly hardening into disbelief. "What are you talking about?" he said slowly. "Our worlds are too different," Cassandra continued, forcing her voice to stay steady even as her chest felt like it was being torn apart. "I knew that from the start, I think. I just didn't want to admit it." "That's not true," Derek said, standing up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor in the quiet library. His voice rose slightly, edged with something raw. "Cassandra, look at me. Tell me the truth. What happened? Did someone threaten you? Is this about your mother? Did my family say something to you?" "This is the truth," Cassandra said, refusing to meet his eyes, knowing that if she looked at him now, she would lose her resolve entirely. "I'm sorry, Derek. I think it's better if we both move on. You have a kingdom to lead. You need someone who fits that future. That's never going to be me." "I don't care about that," Derek said, his voice breaking slightly for the first time since Cassandra had known him. He came around the table, kneeling slightly so he could see her face, his hands reaching for hers. "I told you, I'm going to change things. The traditions don't matter to me. You matter to me. Cassandra, 3 weeks ago, you told me you chose this. You chose me. What changed?" "People change their minds," Cassandra said, her voice barely a whisper, her hands trembling in his. "Not like this," Derek said. "Not you. Not after everything." He searched her face desperately, looking for any crack in her resolve. "Cassandra, please. I know something is wrong. Just tell me what it is. Whatever it is, I can fix it. I'm the future Alpha King. There's nothing I can't fix if you just tell me what's wrong." "That's exactly the problem," Cassandra thought, tears blurring her vision. You would try. You would fight for me, and it would only make everything worse. For my mother, for you, for everyone. Please don't make this harder than it already is, Cassandra whispered, finally looking up at him, her eyes filled with tears she couldn't hold back any longer. Derek stared at her, searching her face for any sign that this was some kind of mistake, some misunderstanding he could fix. His hands tightened gently around hers. Cassandra, he said quietly, almost begging now, all the confidence and command that usually defined him completely gone. Please, don't do this. Whatever it is, we can fix it together. Just talk to me. I'm not asking as the future Alpha King. I'm asking as Derek. Just talk to me. For one agonizing moment, Cassandra almost did. The truth sat right at the edge of her lips. Your family hurt my mother once before, and loving you is killing her now, and for a heartbeat, she thought about saying it, about letting him decide what to do with that truth. But she thought about her mother's face, pale against the pillow. She thought about the healer's letter. Whatever is causing this stress needs to stop. Soon. I'm sorry, Cassandra said one final time, gently pulling her hands free from his. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Derek standing alone in the library, watching the only person he had ever truly chosen disappear through the doors. He didn't follow her. He stood there for a long time after the door closed, staring at the space where she had been, waiting for some part of him to understand what had just happened. None of it made sense. Every instinct he had told him something was wrong, that this wasn't really about their worlds being too different, but he had no idea what else it could be, and Cassandra had given him nothing else to hold on to. He didn't know that by the next morning, Cassandra would be gone not just from the academy, but from the entire region, having quietly arranged to transfer to a healing program in a distant pack, far from the capital, far from the Chandler family's reach. She had spoken to the academy administrators weeks ago, just in case, never imagining she would actually need the arrangement until that very night. He didn't know it would be 7 years before he saw her again. All he knew, standing alone in that empty library, surrounded by the same books they had argued over 100 times, was that something inside him had just been broken, and he had no idea how to fix it. Back in her dorm room, Cassandra moved quickly, packing only what mattered most: a few changes of clothes, her mother's letters, and the small wooden box holding everything precious to her. She had almost finished when a soft knock came at the door. Vanessa stood in the hallway, still in her nightclothes, her expression immediately shifting from sleepy confusion to alarm at the sight of the half-packed bag. Cassandra? What's going on? Where are you going at this hour? I have to leave, Cassandra said simply, not trusting herself to say more without breaking down completely. Leave? Leave where? Does Derek know about this? Vanessa stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. Cassandra, talk to me. You're scaring me. I can't explain everything right now, Cassandra said, her hands trembling as she folded the last of her clothes. I just need you to know that none of this is because of anything you did. You've been the best friend I've ever had, Vanessa. I won't forget that. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears as understanding slowly dawned. This is permanent, isn't it? You're not coming back. Cassandra couldn't answer. She simply pulled Vanessa into a tight hug, holding on for a long moment. Whatever this is, Vanessa whispered, I hope you find peace wherever you're going. Thank you, Cassandra said softly, for everything. By the time the sun rose over Royal Mooncrest Academy, Cassandra Bennett was already gone, leaving behind a kingdom, a future, and a boy who would spend the next 7 years searching for answers she had never been able to give him. 7 years passed. Derek became Alpha King 2 years after Cassandra left, taking on the role with a focus and intensity that quickly earned him the reputation as the most feared and most respected Alpha in generations. Under his rule, the Northern Alliance grew stronger, more unified, more secure than it had been in decades. But despite pressure from every noble family in the kingdom, despite countless arrangements presented to him over the years, Derek never took a mate. He never explained why. He simply refused, every time, with the same calm, immovable finality that had made him so feared in council meetings. Eventually, Even the most persistent families gave up trying. For Cassandra, those 7 years were spent rebuilding everything she thought she had lost. The healing program she transferred to was demanding, far from anything she had known, but she threw herself into it completely, finding a strange comfort in the work. There was something steady about healing a wound either closed or it didn't. A fever either broke or it didn't. It was simple in a way that love had never been. When she returned to Ash Hollow 2 years later, fully trained, she found her mother already recovering, the strange illness that had plagued her slowly fading once the pressure from the capital eased. Cassandra took over the small shop and, over the following years, slowly transformed it first into a proper healing house, then into one of the most respected medical centers along the entire border, known for treating anyone who needed help, regardless of pack or bloodline. She never spoke of Derek, not to her mother, not to Vanessa, not to anyone. But there were nights, especially in the early years, when she would sit outside under the same moon that hung over the capital and wonder if he had moved on, if he was happy, if he ever thought of her at all. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself she had made the right choice, and that some choices simply hurt forever, no matter how right they were. What no one knew what Derek had told, absolutely no one, was that he had spent every one of those 7 years trying to understand what had truly happened that night in the library. He had hired people, quietly, to look into Cassandra's life after she left. He learned that she had completed a healing program with remarkable speed, that she had eventually returned to Ash Hollow, that she had taken over her mother's shop and slowly transformed it into one of the most respected healing centers along the border. He learned that her mother had recovered, fully, within months of Cassandra's departure from the capital. The timing had never made sense to him, not until recently. A few months before the Alliance gathering where our story began, Derek received a report that finally connected everything. Buried in old family records his own father had kept hidden for decades, Derek found documentation of his family's history with a woman named Elaine Bennett, Cassandra's mother. He read about the broken promises, the pressure that had forced her out of her pack decades ago, and he understood, finally, exactly what Cassandra must have learned during that visit home and exactly why she had walked away. She hadn't left because she didn't love him. She had left to protect her mother from the same family that had hurt her once before. Derek sat with that knowledge for days, processing the weight of it, the anger he felt toward his own family's past actions, the guilt for not pushing harder, for not seeing what was happening, and underneath all of it, something he hadn't let himself feel in 7 years: hope. When Derek learned that Cassandra would be attending the Alliance gathering, invited as a respected healer, recognized for her work along the border, he made sure he would be there too. He spent the days leading up to the gathering rehearsing what he would say, discarding one version after another. Every speech sounded either too formal or too desperate, too much like an alpha king, and not enough like the boy who used to share his dinner with her in a quiet library. In the end, he decided not to plan anything at all. Whatever needed to be said would come when he saw her face again. Which brings us back to where we began. The grand hall had gone completely silent. Cassandra stood frozen in front of Derek, 7 years of unspoken words hanging in the air between them. Around them, the entire Alliance watched, sensing that something significant was happening, even if they didn't understand what. "Derek," Cassandra finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did you—" "I know everything," Derek said gently. "About your mother. About what my family did to her years ago. About why you really left." Cassandra's eyes filled with tears. "Derek, You don't have to explain," Derek said, stepping closer, his voice softening even further. "I understand now. I understand why you made the choice you did. You were protecting the person you loved most, even though it cost you everything." He paused. "I just wish you had trusted me enough to tell me. We could have found another way. Together." "I was scared," Cassandra admitted, tears finally spilling over. "I thought if I told you, you'd try to fix it, and it would only make things worse for my mother. I thought leaving was the only way to keep her safe." "And it worked," Derek said gently. Your mother is healthy now. Your healing center is respected throughout the entire region. You built something incredible, Cassandra, on your own, without me. It still cost something, Cassandra said softly. Every single day, for 7 years, it cost something. I know, Derek said. It cost me too. Every council meeting, every arrangement my family tried to push on me, every quiet evening in that same library, all of it reminded me of you. I told myself I was waiting for an answer. I didn't realize, until I found those records, that what I was really waiting for was you. But I lost you, Cassandra whispered. You never lost me, Derek said, his voice firm now, carrying easily across the silent hall. Not for one single day in 7 years. He reached out and gently took her hand, the same way he had years ago in that quiet alcove at the academy. 7 years ago, you walked away because you believed it was the only way to protect the people you loved, Derek said, his voice rising slightly so that everyone in the hall could hear him clearly. I understand that now. I respect it. But that was 7 years ago. He turned, facing Cassandra directly, his silver eyes filled with a warmth and certainty that left no room for doubt. I am Alpha King now. There is no tradition, no family pressure, no council decision that can separate us, if I choose otherwise. And I am choosing you, Cassandra Bennett, now, in front of everyone, the same way I should have fought harder to choose you 7 years ago. Cassandra stared at him, her heart pounding. 7 years of carefully built walls crumbling away in an instant. Derek, she whispered, are you sure? After everything. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, Derek said. He raised her hand gently to his lips, pressing a soft kiss against her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. No one will separate us again. Not my family, not tradition, not 7 years, and not 7 more after that. I'm not letting you go, Cassandra. Not this time. For a long moment, Cassandra simply stared at him, searching his face for any trace of doubt, any sign of hesitation. She found none. Slowly, a smile broke across her face, the first truly free smile she had allowed herself in 7 years. Then I guess, she said softly, I'm not running anymore. Around them, the hall erupted into quiet murmurs of surprise and approval, but neither Derek nor Cassandra paid any attention to the crowd. For the first time in 7 years, the world around them simply faded away, leaving only the two of them, finally standing together exactly where they were always meant to be. In the months that followed, Derek officially recognized Cassandra as his chosen mate, fulfilling the promise he had made to her all those years ago at the academy, a promise to change the old traditions, to build a future where bloodline mattered less than character, where love mattered more than expectations. The ceremony took place in early autumn, in the same grand hall where they had found each other again 7 years later. This time there were no whispers of confusion, no rumors, no shadows hanging over them. Only the steady warmth of a kingdom that had, slowly but surely, come to accept what Derek had known for a long time, that the right person for the role of Luna was not decided by bloodline, but by the kind of heart they carried. Vanessa Foster stood near the front, beaming with pride, occasionally elbowing Trevor, who had come as her guest, and who watched the ceremony with a genuine, easy happiness, having long since made peace with how things had turned out. When Derek placed the traditional mark of recognition on Cassandra's hand, his voice carried clearly through the silent hall. 7 years ago, I made a promise to change the old ways, Derek said, his eyes never leaving Cassandra's. Today, I keep that promise, not because tradition demands it, but because love does. Cassandra's eyes glistened as she looked up at him. Then I guess, she whispered, echoing words from 7 years earlier, we finally get the future we were always meant to have. Cassandra's healing center expanded, eventually becoming one of the most important medical institutions in the entire Northern Alliance, treating wolves from every pack, regardless of status or background. Young healers from Border Pax girls who reminded Cassandra of herself at that age, quiet and overlooked, carrying more strength than anyone gave them credit for, came to train under her, and Cassandra made sure every single one of them knew that where they came from never determined where they could go. Her mother, healthier and stronger than she had been in years, attended the ceremony where Derek and Cassandra were officially recognized, watching with tears of joy as her daughter took her place beside the Alpha King. Not because of who her family was, but because of who she had always been. Afterward, Derek made a quiet decision of his own. He sought out Elaine Bennett personally, and in a private conversation that no records would ever fully capture, he offered something his family had refused to offer decades earlier: an apology and an open invitation to return to the pack she had once been forced to leave, with full honor restored to her name. Elaine declined the offer to return, choosing instead to remain in Ash Hollow, in the small shop that had become her home. But she told Derek, with tears in her eyes, that simply hearing the apology was enough to finally let go of a pain she had carried for over 30 years. As for Derek, the most feared Alpha King in generations finally found something he had been missing for 7 long years: not power, not control, but peace. The quiet, steady peace of finally being exactly where he belonged, beside the one person who had never stopped being worth waiting for. In the years that followed, the story of the Alpha King and the healer from the Border Pack became something of a legend throughout the Northern Alliance, not because of titles or politics, but because it reminded people of something simple. That love, real love, doesn't ask what family you come from. It only asks who you choose to be and who you choose to stand beside, no matter how long the wait, no matter how far the distance. 7 years of silence, 7 years of distance. And finally, 7 years later, a beginning that was worth every single moment of waiting.